Hey, what's party? Welcome back to News Dose, and we actually got a very welcome update for one of Xbox's most mysterious games today. I know there's been a lot of concern here recently for Xbox games that, haven't been updated in quite some time, but I do come bearing some fairly good news today, or at least somewhat, because unfortunately, Sony, they're doing their typical thing, and I'm very much in disagreement with a lot of people over this particular subject. A lot of people are giving Sony a pass for this decision, but I'm not, because I think this highlights the very definition of what's wrong with Sony this generation. So we do have a lot to get into today, but first, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do. I truly do appreciate each and every one of you. Let's go and get right into things, though, starting off with yet another Tales of Remaster. Bandai Namco has made it their mission to bring back some of their older Tales of games, and they're even seemingly revisiting the PlayStation 1 era now. It's been spotted that Bandai Namco recently filed a trademark for Tales of Destiny. Now, admittedly, I've never played this game. I didn't get into the Tales of series until Vesperia on the Xbox 360, which is still one of my favorite JRPGs to this day. Just incredible characters. But that's one of the things that I love about remasters. It not only gives longtime fans a reason to jump back in, but it also gives other people like me a chance to play a game that they otherwise missed. In fact, one of my favorite games this year has actually been the Lunar Collection. I never played the originals back on the PlayStation 1, but I absolutely adore them now that I've gotten a chance to play them myself. They're definitely some of the more overlooked JRPGs for sure. I'd highly recommend them. But yeah, I'm really glad that Bandai Namco is revisiting a lot of these Tales of games once again. Now, speaking of Japanese games, Sega announced that last year's Metaphor Refantazio has officially surpassed 2 million units sold, and I've seen some mixed reactions for this, which is very telling for the modern era and just how ridiculous expectations have increased over the years. It's really become unrealistic by this point, but what I will say here is that 2 million units sold for a new IP in less than a year is actually respectable, and it will continue to grow over time. I fully expect it to eventually release on the Switch 2, which I think is going to be a perfect platform for it, and that will give it yet another boost. And I mean, if Persona is anything to go by, it'll likely have strong legs over time. Plus, this also gives Sega another high-quality franchise to work with. This was a Game of the Year contender just last year. I mean, they created a new studio for this game, and hey, they can now operate independently from the Persona team and more or less put it on a cycle. Every few years, we could end up getting a new Persona title, a Persona remake. There's also Shin Megami Tensei, and now we can also add Refantazio to that cycle as well. And I think with that in mind, Sega is probably satisfied with these early results. Now, Donkey Kong Bonanza, of course, released today. If you're playing it, I hope you're enjoying it. But there's actually another high-profile game that will be out tomorrow, being Shadow Labrynth. Now, I have no idea what possessed Bandai Namco to stick with this release date. I feel like this could have been a game that would have been well-positioned for the Switch 2. Seems like a game that Nintendo fans would probably like, but yeah, pretty much every Switch 2 owner will likely be playing Donkey Kong. This is honestly just a terrible release date for Shadow Labrynth, to the point that I don't think that most people even realizes that it will be out tomorrow. However, this is a brand new take for the Pac-Man series. It's a darker, grittier Pac-Man than we're used to seeing, and it's set in a Metroidvania world. Unfortunately, though, its early reviews have been mixed at best. Currently has a 74 overall score on Metacritic with a total of 22 reviews. Definitely seems to be a love it or hate it type of game, but hey, if you're interested, maybe check some reviews out before it releases tomorrow on July 18th. Alright, moving on, I want to talk about PlayStation because this type of stuff honestly grinds my gears. It actually frustrates me just how far Sony has fallen since last generation, and I feel like people barely even acknowledge it. Like, it's crazy to me just how so many people are willing to accept them, lowering the bar year after year. I just don't get it, but it really is a leadership thing in my opinion. And I'm not saying that PlayStation doesn't have some really good games for the PlayStation 5. Last year, Astrobot was my game of the year, and I liked what they did early in the generation. But most of their studios have been MIA for the last few years. If you look at last year, it really was Astrobot, and that was pretty much it. Then if you look at this year, it's Ghost of Yotei. And again, that's pretty much it. Their consistent pipeline that we used to get has been absolutely dismantled thanks to Jim Ryan and Herman Hulst and their shift to live service games, most of which, I'm going to point out, has been canceled. Even with all of that, though, it would at least be nice to get some kind of roadmap from Sony and what their studios are up to. But they have been radio silent all generation long. I mean, out of all of the big three, Xbox, Nintendo, and PlayStation, Sony by far speaks to their fans the least, which to me comes off as arrogant and complacent. This is all the more reason that I don't like the Xbox as being less competitive this generation, because I firmly believe that competition breeds excellence. That's for a different topic. But the reason I bring all of this up today is because Sony, yet again, confirmed that they are skipping this year's Gamescom. Now, a lot of people are going to look at that and they're going to simply say, who cares? This isn't surprising even in the slightest, because this is actually the 6th year in a row that they've skipped out on Gamescom. But that's also exactly what I'm trying to say. This is the problem. All of this lines up with Sony's new leadership and their forever radio silence that we've gotten for the PlayStation 5. Let me put it this way. When was the last time that PlayStation legitimately gave us a good showcase? I truthfully can't remember. I mean, I remember back during the E3 days, back when Sony used to have a real pizzazz to them. They would come with the heat to show up Xbox, and it was honestly fun times. You know, the competition between Xbox and PlayStation, who's going to have the better E3. Sony would always come out with some major announcements, some big-time game reveals, some surprises along the way. But now under their new leadership, it just seems like they don't care. And truthfully, if you think about it, why should they? Fans are willing to give them a pass. The media is willing to give them the pass. And from Sony's perspective, they look at Xbox and they're saying, well, their consoles aren't selling. So really, PlayStation can literally do nothing and still sell by simply existing off of their brand name. And I get it. People are going to look at this video and they're going to call me a PlayStation hater. But I want to see them do better. I genuinely, truthfully do, because I think they're important. I like PlayStation games. I want to see them do better. And I keep saying this, but if you look at Sony and the PlayStation that we see today, they're a shell of what they were just a single generation ago. It's certainly not the PlayStation that I grew up with. My personal favorite PlayStation generation was actually the PlayStation 3, and I know that sounds blasphemous because it was actually their worst selling console, but I'll tell you what that did for them. It woke Sony up in a way that we've not seen since, because they had to truly compete with a creative edge that generation. That's how I remember that generation. They pushed out so many exclusives that paved the way to the PlayStation 5. That PlayStation 4 momentum didn't just start with the PlayStation 4 and all of the mess-ups that came with the Xbox One. It started on the PlayStation 3, where they started to become a first-party powerhouse. And I just miss those days from Sony. Sony is supposed to be this amazing first-party powerhouse, but now we're lucky to see one big PlayStation-developed game a year. They even recently said that in an investors meeting that they'll at least release one tentpole first-party game a year, as if that's something to brag about. Talk about lowering the bar. But hey, I guess that's a part of what fans wanted. They wanted Xbox to die, and this is kind of the result for that. Complacency. That's the result of less competition, and this is why I continue to preach why it's so important. People take criticism as if it's hate, but in reality, shouldn't we want Sony to do better? Shouldn't we? I don't know. Maybe people just want them to be complacent, or maybe they don't realize just how good PlayStation was back in the PS4 and the PS3. I don't know. It is what it is, I guess, but let me know what you all think about all this. Do you think that I'm off base, or are you satisfied by how Sony has been run this generation? Okay, now one last thing before we go. We got another welcome update for an Xbox published game, being Contraband. Now, this is kind of a strange one to talk about just because it got revealed years and years ago with a small, and I mean a very small, teaser trailer. It's being developed by Avalanche Games, which is behind the Just Cause series. You know, so they're an established studio, but pretty much outside of that, we really don't know much about this game. We've seen zero gameplay up to this point, and one thing that we've learned this past month is that if your game is struggling, if it's been in development hell for a long time, you know, Microsoft doesn't mind shutting it down. So there's been some concern about Contraband and, you know, the status of what this game is, but we can now lay those concerns to rest, or at least for the time being. It's been spotted that a job listing was recently posted for Contraband. You can read the listing here, which says, as the product lead for Live, you are responsible for the player acquisition, engagement, retention, and monetization strategy of our Live service. You will own the product vision for Live, optimize player value for our Live KPIs, manage a small team of product managers, and lead marketing, community, and analytics for the project. So, I mean, if you didn't already know, Contraband is being developed as a live service title. That's probably one of the main reasons that I'm not overly hyped for this game, but even still, I do know that there's a lot of people that are interested. And at the very least, you can now rest assured that it's still on its way. With that in mind, though, just hopefully we'll get an actual more detailed update in the nearest future. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode. But until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.